Okay, so let's get right into it. An LLM tells you it's 95% confident. Do you trust that number? I mean, really, how do we even know if an AI is a good judge of its own knowledge? Well, that's what we're going to dig into. Because the answer, it tells us something really fundamental about where AI is headed.
All right, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the big problem with how we currently measure AI confidence. Then, we'll introduce a totally new way of thinking about it, knowing versus knowing you know. After that, we'll get into the really good stuff, a new gold standard metric that reveals some, well, pretty surprising gaps in today's models. And finally, we'll talk about what this all means for building smarter, or maybe I should say, wiser AI.
So let's dive into our first topic, the AI confidence problem. And here's the bottom line really. The way we usually measure an AI's confidence, it's not just a little off, it can be seriously, dangerously misleading. It often ends up rewarding the exact opposite of what we want and hides some really critical flaws.
Okay, to really get what I'm talking about, let's just do a quick thought experiment. Imagine it's your job. You have to pick one of two AI models for something super important. Say, a system that helps doctors with diagnoses. Which one do you choose? So you've got Model A and Model B. Now on paper, Model A looks amazing, right? 90% accuracy, and it reports 90% confidence on every single answer. It's got a perfect calibration score. But think about it. That confidence number is totally useless in practice. It never changes. Model B, though, is different. Yeah, its overall accuracy is a bit lower. But look at its confidence. It tells you, hey, I'm pretty sure about this one. Or, maybe double-check this answer. That signals what's actually useful. It's the kind of self-awareness we're after. And it's something that these standard metrics just completely fly over. So, how do we fix this? How do we measure that useful signal from Model B? Well, it turns out we need a whole new lens. And luckily, we don't have to invent it from scratch. We can borrow a really powerful idea from decades of research in psychology. It's called signal detection theory, and it's perfect for this. It gives us a way to finally and rigorously separate what an AI knows from how well it knows what it knows.
Okay, so this framework gives us two key concepts. First up is type 1 sensitivity. Just think of this as the model's raw horsepower. It's simply how good it is at the basic task. Can it tell a right answer from a wrong one? That's it. It's all about its actual knowledge, completely separate from how confident it might feel about it.
But now we get to the really cool part, type 2 sensitivity. This is the game changer. This measures how well the model's own confidence lines up with its actual knowledge. It's a measure of its self-monitoring. Basically, does it know when it's right and when it's guessing? And just to be super clear, we're not talking about consciousness or feelings here. This is purely about a functional ability. Can the system access its own internal signals of uncertainty? That's what we're measuring.
So now we have these two separate measurements, what the model knows and how well it tracks that knowledge. The big question is, how do we combine them? How can we get a single number that tells us how efficient a model's self-monitoring is compared to what it actually knows?
And the answer is this incredibly elegant but super powerful formula called the metacognitive efficiency ratio. We just call it the M ratio. And it's as simple as it looks. You just take its type 2 sensitivity, that self-monitoring ability, and divide it by its type 1 sensitivity, its raw knowledge. What this gives you is a single beautiful number that answers one crucial question. For all the stuff this model knows, how much of that knowledge actually makes it into its confidence score?
So what does this number actually mean? Well, it's pretty intuitive. If the M ratio is 1, that's perfect. That's optimal. It means the AI's confidence is a perfect reflection of its knowledge. Now, if the M ratio is less than 1, that's what we call metacognitive loss. It's like there's a leak. The model actually knows more than its confidence score lets on. An M ratio over 1 is really rare, but it would mean the confidence signal is somehow picking up on extra info. So yeah, you can see why this M ratio is becoming the new gold standard for really understanding an AI's self-awareness.
Okay, so we have our new tool, the M ratio. Now for the fun part. What happens when we actually use this to measure some of the big AI models you've heard of? Well, let me just say the results are not what you'd expect. In fact, they're pretty shocking, and they turn a lot of what we thought we knew completely on its head.
This chart right here tells the whole story. It's just a fantastic visualization. So along the bottom, the x-axis, you have basic performance, how much the model knows. And up the side, the y-axis, that's the self-monitoring part. That dashed line through the middle, that's perfection. That's an M ratio of 1. Now, look for Mistral. It's the one furthest to the right, which means it has the highest raw knowledge. It's the smartest model in the group by that measure. But now look how far down it is, how far it falls below that perfect line. It is by far the worst self-monitor of the bunch. It's the classic case of being brilliant but having no idea when you're about to be wrong.
And if you look at the rankings, it's just a complete flip. The standard metrics, the old way of doing things, would tell you Mistral is #1, hands down. But the M ratio, our measure of useful self-awareness, says Mistral is dead last. And Gemma, which was last on the old metric, is now tied for first. Just let that sink in. Depending on which metric you trust, you would make a completely opposite choice about which model to deploy. That's not a small discrepancy, that's a massive problem.
And believe it or not, it gets even more complicated. These self-awareness gaps aren't a single fixed thing. A model can be a great self-monitor for one topic, like history, but be completely blind to its own mistakes when you ask it about, say, computer science. This means there are these hidden pockets of risk that you'd never see if you only looked at one big average score. So, okay, this is all fascinating, but what's the takeaway? What do we actually do with this information? Well, the good news is, these insights don't just point out problems. They actually give us a really clear path forward for building better, more reliable AI.
And this leads to one of the weirdest findings from the research. You know how we usually ask for confidence on a scale of 0 to 100? Well, it turns out the models don't really use that scale. Get this, over 78% of the time, they just spit out one of a few round numbers, like 80, 90, or 100. It's bizarre. It's like having a super precise digital thermometer that only ever reads 70, 80, or 90 degrees. You're losing all the nuance.
All that clustering around round numbers makes the 0 to 100 scale really noisy and not very useful. But here is the craziest part, and it's a super practical tip. The fix? Just ask for confidence on a 0 to 20 scale instead. It sounds weird, I know, but this one tiny change consistently improved metacognitive efficiency for every single model they tested. The thinking is that this smaller scale forces the model to be more careful and precise about mapping its internal feeling of uncertainty onto a number.
So let's wrap this up with some clear, actionable advice for anyone out there building or evaluating these systems. Number 1, start reporting the M ratio. It needs to be a standard metric right alongside accuracy. 2, don't just look at the overall score. You have to break it down by domain to find those hidden blind spots. 3, if you're building an application where trusting the AI's confidence is important, you should absolutely prioritize models with a higher M ratio. And 4, pay attention to how things like temperature settings affect confidence. It's a separate knob from pure capability. Because at the end of the day, sometimes knowing your limits is way more important than just being smart.
And really, all of this pushes us toward a much bigger question, one that goes beyond just engineering. For so long, the race has been about building smarter AI, models with higher accuracy, better performance. But maybe that's not the right goal. Maybe the real challenge, the more important quest, is to build wise AI. Systems that don't just have the right answers, but also have the wisdom to know when they don't.